Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another video. So this is a 2 hours long Express crash course for beginners. And in this video, we will build a Node Express project from scratch. Let me show you the topics that we are going to build in this video. So we will first start with the Express project setup, and then we will move to how we can create an Express server. We will also see how we can install the Thunder client to test our APIs. Then we will set up the Express router, and after that we will see that how we can handle error in Express and using the Async handler. Then we are going to see how we can set up the Express middleware for our project. After that we will have the MongoDB setup, and then we will learn how we can use Mongoose schema in order to communicate with our database. Then we will see how we can have the CRUD API in our project. The next topic that we will cover is the user authentication. We will see how we can authenticate our users, and we will have the registration and the login endpoints. Then we will see how we can have the controllers, which will help us to communicate with our database for different operations. Then we will see how we can do the password hashing and then compare the hash password with the raw password. Then we will also use the JWT token. So we are going to have the sign in and verify of the JWT token for the authentication part. Then we will see how we can handle the relationship using Mongoose schema for our different documents in our MongoDB. Then we are going to see how we can do the protected routes, so only authenticated user will be able to access those routes. Next, we are going to have the user authorization, so that only authorized user should be able to access our endpoints. And after that, in the end, we are going to see the API testing, so how we are going to test our API and the project. You can also find the detailed timestamp in the description of the video so that you can jump to any topic directly. So if this sounds interesting, then stick around. Also, don't forget to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the videos like this one. So let's get started. Alright guys, so in this video we are going to build a contact manager application, and we are going to build the APIs of how we can manage the contacts. We are also going to introduce the authentication and authorization concept in order to build this application. So before we go deep dive, I want to give you some overview on the RESTful API conventions, because we are going to build the REST APIs. So this is the RESTful API conventions where you will see that we have the CRUD actions, and first what we will do is we will simply going to build a CRUD API for the contacts, and contacts will be our resource. So we will have different CRUD actions like get all contacts, get a single contact, create contact, update contact, and delete contact. And for that we are going to use the HTTP methods as get, put, post, and delete. And on the extreme right you will see the endpoints. So we are having a /API/contacts, and for the other one we have the API contacts/ID. So we will have to pass the ID in order to get an individual contact or update a contact or delete a contact. And to start with this application, we need to install the Node.js in our machine. So I already have the Node.js installed in my machine, and if you want to install it, then you can go to the official documentation of Node.js, and then you can simply install the current version or the recommended version for the most users. Now we will also need a Visual Studio Code, so you can download the Visual Studio Code from the official documentation. Now let's jump to the Visual Studio Code, and here what we are going to do is first we are going to set up our project. So let's go to the terminal, and I'm going to open the terminal. All right, and then I'm going to go to my documents directory. So let's go to the documents, and inside the documents directory here I'm going to create a new directory which will be, so this will reflect the backend APIs of my contact. Alright, so now I will go to my contacts directory, and here first we need to initialize our project. So what I can do is I can write the npm init, and with this npm init it's going to ask us few questions so that it will generate our package.json file. So for the package name, I'm going to give the name as my contacts backend API. Alright, version is still 1.0.0, and here it will be this is Express project for my contacts backend API. And then the next thing is we need to define the entry point. So I'm going to define the entry point as server.js. I'm not going to add anything on the test command. I will not add the git repository, no keywords. As an author, I'm going to add the page Malvia, and for the license I'm going to have the MIT, and then I'm going to click yes. So now we have the package.json file. Now let's open this directory in our Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to do an open I will go to the documents and I'm going to open the Express project, and inside that my contacts. So I will just click on the trust the author, and you will see that we have the package.json. Now we haven't installed any dependencies and there is not much inside our package.json file. Now the next thing what we will do is we are going to create a get ignore file. So I will go here and I will create the get ignore, and inside the get ignore I'm going to add the node modules. So we don't want the node modules to be part of our git repository, and I also don't want to add the .env file because that will be only for the development purpose. All right, so now we have that, and now let's create the server.js file. So I'm going to go here, I will have the server.js. So we have the server.js, and inside the server.js let's create a basic Express server. So for that, first we need to install the Express. So what I will do is let's go to the terminal, and inside the terminal we will install the Express.js. So let's install the npm install Express, and then I'm going to hit enter. All right, so we have the Express, and along with that we will also need to install the nodemon so that it will automatically restart our server whenever we make any changes. All right, I will go to the package.json and we can verify that we have the nodemon as dev dependency, and for the dependency we have the Express.js. Now the scripts, and I will add the scripts to start my server. So what I will do is I'm going to have the start, and for the start what I will write is I'm going to write the node server.js, and I will also add one more which will be for the development, and for the development I'm going to run with the help of a nodemon. So let's have the nodemon server.js. I will save it, and now if I go and run it, so let's run the npm run dev, and this is going to run our server.js. But right now we don't have anything in the server.js, so what I will do is I'm going to do a simply console.log and write I am in Express project. All right, I will save it, and you will see that as soon as I save this, the nodemon restarts the file automatically, and we see that I am in the Express project. So now we have the Express installed. Now let's create a Express server. So we'll have the Express, which will be equals to the require, and that will be the Express. I have misspelled the require, so let me correct. And then what I have to do is I will define a port. So I will have to define a port, and let's define the port as 5000. So once we have the Express installed, we are going to have equals to the Express. Now since we have created the app, now we can have a listen on the app on our port 5000. So what I will do is I'm going to have the app.listen, and this will listen on the port that we have created. So we have the port, and this port is going to give us a callback, and here we can write the console.log, and let's have the server running on port, and we can pass the port here. All right, I will save it. Now you see that we have a server running on the port 5000. So this is the static server which we have given, but usually in our project we are going to have an environment variable file where we are going to define the port. So let's do that. So what I will do is I'm going to create a new file with the name .env, and here I will have the port, and I will give the port as 5001. I can make use of a .env package. So let's install the .env package. So I'm going to go here and I will have the npm install .env. So now as I have the .env, this is going to give me an access to fetch the value of the port from the environment variable file with the help of a process module, which is a core module of Node.js. So I will show you how we can do that. Let's have a constant .env, and this will be equals to the require, and I'm going to pass the .env, and then we have to use the config method. I will change this to equals to, and now we have this. It has a process.env, and I can pass the port, and my server is now running on the port 5001, which I have specified in the environment variable file. Now the next thing we need to do is, since we have created the app and we are listening on the port, now we need to test it. So if we want to test the APIs, we need an HTTP client. There are multiple HTTP clients which you can use, but for this project I'm going to use the Thunder client, which will be an extension inside the Visual Studio Code itself. You can also prefer to use the Postman, which will be a separate application, so you need to switch between your Visual Studio Code and the Postman. So that is the reason I'm going to use the Thunder client. So if you want to use the Thunder client, you can click on this icon in the extension, and then you can search for the Thunder client and you can just install it. Once you install the Thunder client, what you will see is you will see an icon of the Thunder client. So if you can click on that, and if I go and create a new request, then you will see that I'm going to remove all this. I will have the HTTP localhost. My port is 5001, and now I will just send a request. So what I will do is I'm going to click on the send, and you will see that as soon as I click on the send, we see a 404 because we haven't configured any route for this, and we see an HTML response with an error page. Now let's go and change it. So what I will do is I'm going to have the app, and then I'm going to use a get method, and I want to listen for API/contacts. So let me have the contacts, and then when I have this, it's going to give me a request and a response, and this will be an arrow function. And then what I can do is I can do a res.send, and I can give a message here which I want. So what I will write is get all contacts. Our server is restarted, and now if I go here and for API contacts, and now if I click on the get all contacts, now we are not passing a response as a JSON format, but if we want to pass our response as a JSON, what we can do is we can use a res.json, and this is going to give us a JSON format. So what I will do is I'm going to have the message, and the message will be like this. And now if I send, then you will see that we get a message in the JSON format. Now what we can also do is we can also pass the status code. So what I will do is I'm going to have the res.status, and I can have the status as 200, and then I can pass the JSON response. I will save it, and if I hit it, you will still see that we have the same result. But what we are going to do is we are not going to configure all our routes in the server.js. So to make a clean implementation, we are going to create a new folder which will handle all our routes. So I'm going to go here and let's create the routes folder. And inside the routes, I'm going to create a new file which will be the contact routes.js. And now in the contact route.js, what we are going to do is let's first import require, and I'm going to have the express. Now what we need to do is now we can configure the routes on this router. So I will have the router.route, and in this router.route, what I can do is if I go here, then we can actually take this completely. So I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to add it here. I will save it. And here what we can do is instead of using this get, what we will do is we want to make use of a use, and here we can define our contact routes. So for that, what I will do is since for every API we are going to have this API/contacts as a common API URL. So what I will do is I'm going to cut this, and I will have simply slash here, and here we can make use of that. So we will have this, and then we need that whenever we have the app.use. So usually this app.use are known as middleware. So we are adding the middleware in our Express project. So here we will do a require, and here we can define the path of our route. So that will be the /route/contact route. I will save it. And then if we go in the routes now, then here what we can do is we need to export our router. So for that, what we will do is let's go and just use the module.export. So I'm going to have the module.export, and we are going to export the router. I will save it, and you will see that as soon as we save it, now we don't see the error. And if we're going to try it in the Thunder client, we will still going to see the same results. So if I send it, so we are getting an error. That means we made a mistake. So here we are using the app.use as middleware for our API URL /API/contacts, and then we are passing our contact routes. Now if we go to the contact routes, we have the router.route, and then on this route we have to define our get method. So we are going to have a get which is going to give us a request response, and I will save it. Now let's go and try. So if I send it, now we see that we have the get all contacts. So this we have defined it. Now what we can do is this is one of the route. Now similarly we need to define the put, post and delete. So what I will do is I'm going to copy this. And since for this, for the post also, we are going to have the same endpoint, which will be the slash. And here we are going to have the, instead of get all contacts, we are going to write here as create contact. Now the next one is the slash, and then we need to pass the ID here. So we will have the ID, and then we are going to have a put which is going to update our contact. So let's change the message as update contact. And whenever we have the ID, what we need to do is we are going to have a update contact. Let's have the param. So what I will do is I'm going to use the backtick, and here what I will do is I'm going to have the request dot param dot id. I'll save it. And for the delete, I'm going to change this to delete, and for the delete also we are going to have the id. So let's have the id, and then here also what I will do is I'm going to copy this. Let's have the backtick, and then I'm going to have here delete contact for this particular id. We can also make a route for the get an individual contact. So I'm going to have a get here. I will have the request response, and here I'm going to have the get contact for this. I will save it. So now we have created multiple routes. Now let's give a try in our Postman. First, we know that when we have a get request, and then whenever we have a get method, and then we have the contacts resource, and if we send it, we see get all contacts. Now let's do a post. I'm going to have a post, and I will send it, and it says that we have a create contact. Now let's have a put. So what I will do is I'm going to pass an ID which is 1, and I will send it. Then you will see that the update contact for 1. Now let's go and check for the delete. It will going to give us the same delete contact for 1. And if we do a get request, then it will be a get for an individual contact, which will be a get contact for 1. All right, so now we have all our routes, and now what we are going to do is we are going to create the controllers. So that controllers is going to contain all our logic for the request response, and it is going to connect with our database. So what I will do is let's go and create the controllers folder. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to have the controllers, and inside the controllers, what I will do is I'm going to create my contact controller. So let's create a file, and I'm going to have the contact controller dot JS. And inside the contact controller, what we are going to do is whenever we create the API methods, we always need to give some labels to that. So how we can give the label is I'm going to write a description, and the description will be for get all contacts. And then I'm going to have the route. So my route will be, it will be a get slash API slash contacts. And then we are going to define the access to the API. So for now, the access is public. Later on, we are going to make it as a private when we are going to introduce the authentication. All right, now I'm going to create a constant here, and that constant will be the get contact. And then what I can do is I can simply remove this logic part from here, and then I'm going to cut it and I'm going to add it here. All right, I will save it. And then in the end, what I have to do is I have to do the module dot export, and I'm going to export the get contact. All right, I will save it. Now I can make use of the get contact in my contact routes. So let's import that. So I will have the constant, then I'm going to have the get contact, and this contact will be coming from the, so I will have the require dot slash controller slash contact controller. And now what I can do is I can make use of this get contact, and I can add the get contact here. I will copy and then I will add it here. Now this way we can also modify for the post, get, put, and delete. So let's go and create it. So what I will do is I'm going to copy this for the create. So in this, it's going to be create contact. So let me change this to create contact, and this will be changed to create new contact. So let's have a create new contact. All right, I will change this to contact. This will now change to post, and the access will still be the public. And then whenever we create a new contact, we actually going to give a response as 201, which is as resource created. Now this will get changed. So let's go and get it from here. So I'm going to go and take this out. I'm going to cut it, and let's add in my create contact. I'm going to change this to 201. I'll save it. Now we need to expose this. So let's have it here. Now let's go and create for the put, for delete, and I'm going to add it for get an individual contact. So this will be the get contact. This will become a get request. Here we need to pass an ID. All right, this will be a public, and here we are going to have a get contact. All right, and then we can just add it from here. So I'm going to cut this and I'm going to add it here. So let me add it here. And since we are getting an error, because this should be get contacts, and this is the create contact, which we are going to change it here anyway. All right, so we have the get individual contact, and the next thing is let's update the contact. So let's have the update contact. This will be changed to update contact. So I'm going to change it to update contact, and then we can change this. So let's go to the routes, and from the routes I'm going to copy this, cut, and then add it here. And the last one is the delete contact. So let's have the delete contact. This will now change to delete. This will change to put. This will change to delete, and then we have the delete contact API/contacts, and this will have the ID. We forgot to add ID here, so let's add the ID as well. The access will be public, and then we are going to remove it from here. Let's cut it and let's add it here. All right, so now we have created all the methods in our controller. Now we need to expose them. So I will going to have the get contact, then I'm going to have the update contact, and then there is a delete contact. Now we can use all these method in our routes file. So I'm going to copy this and let's add it here. Now we have it. Now let's add the method in our routes. So I have a create contact, so I'm going to copy and I'm going to add it here. For get contact, I'm going to add it here, and this will become get contacts. So this will get changed to get contacts. So we have to go and change here as well. This will be the get contacts. I will save it. Now let's go here. I will save it here as well. And then we have the update contact. So let's add the update contact and then the delete contact. So I'm going to add the delete contact as well. So we have defined the routes. We now also have the controller, which is going to contain the logic of all our request connection to the database. Now what we can do is here we can actually simplify more, and what we will do is since you will notice that these two routes are almost the same, so what we can do is we can actually write here dot post, cut it, and I'm going to add it here. Now we can remove this, so this way it can help us to save some lines. So for the other three routes we have a common route, so we are going to just cut and we are going to add it here. So let's add it here, and I'm going to remove this. Now we have it, and now let's give a try. We are going to test our APIs again. So if I go here and if I have the contacts, then we still see the contacts. So our APIs are still working. We have the put. I'm going to add the ID. I still see the ID. For delete, I still see the ID, and for the get individual contact, I still see the ID. So everything works fine. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to accept the body from the request. So what we will do is if we go to the Thunder client, and if we do a post request, and inside the post if we want to pass a body, so let's have a body. So what I will do is for the contact, I'm going to have the name. So let's add the name as the page. I'm going to have my email address. So let's have the page @gmail.com, and then I'm going to pass the phone number. So let's have the phone, and I'm going to add some random phone number. Now I'm going to send this request so that we can create the new contact. So if we go in our contact controller, then we will see that let's do first the console log of the request. So I'm going to have the console.log. I will have the request.body. So I need this body in order to create the new contact. So I'm going to have the console log. So the request body is, and I'm going to have the request body. Now if I see in the terminal, and if I go here and if I click on the send, then you will see that the request body is undefined, and that is because whenever you need to accept some data from the client to our server, we need to use a body parser so that we can parse the stream of the data that we are receiving from the client. And for that, what we have to do is we need to make use of a middleware. And Express provide us the middleware for the JSON object, which we can get it from the client. So what I will do is I'm going to go to my server.js, and in the server.js we are going to apply a inbuilt middleware, which is the app.use, and then here I can have the Express and I can have the JSON. And now this is going to provide a parser which will help us to parse the data stream that we receive from the client on the server side. So if we go back, and now this time if we send a request, then you will see that we get the body, which is the name, email, and the phone number, which is the contact that we want to create. Now what we will do is, now if we don't pass any body, so if we don't have any of the body and if we still send it, then we are going to see the empty body, but we don't want to accept this. So now let's see how we can do the error handling with the help of the Express framework. So if we go to our controller, and in the controller, what I will do is, now we have the request body. First I'm going to destructure it. So I'm going to have the name, email, and the phone, and this will be coming from the request.body. Now I'm going to apply a condition that if we don't have a name, or we don't have an email, or if we don't have a phone, so in that case what I want is, I want to throw an error. So I'm going to have the response.status. The status will be 400, and then I'm going to use the throw keyword and then throw an error, and here I'm going to write is as all fields are mandatory. All right, I will save it, and now let's see. So if I go back here and if I send a request, then you will see that we get an error. We also see that we have an error message, all fields are mandatory, but you see that this error message is not in a JSON format. It's in the form of an HTML. So for that, if we want to change it, what we need to do is, we need to create a custom middleware which is going to accept the request response, and then in between it's going to transform the response into a JSON. So what I will do is, I'm going to create a new folder, and I will name it as middleware, and inside the middleware I'm going to create a file with error handler.js. So I'm going to go here, let's have the error handler.js. I will just make it camel case, and now in the error handler.js, what I can do is I'm going to create a constant error handler, and this is going to have a request, response, next, and then the first parameter will be an error. All right, so we have that, and this is going to be an arrow function, and then what we can do is, we can simply do the module.export. So let's have the module.export, and we can export the error handler. And now if we want to use this error handler, we need to apply this in our server.js. So if we go to the server.js, then what we can do is, we can make use of the app.use. So whenever we need to use a middleware, we make use of this app.use, and we need to use the error handler. Now the error handler is auto imported. So now we have created an error handler middleware, and we have also used it in our server.js. Now let's transform this. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create a constant. I will have the status code, and this status code will be in the response. So if we go in our controller, then we see that we have passed the status as 400. So if we have a status code, we are going to pass that status code, but in case if we don't have it, we are going to pass a status code of 500. All right, I will save it, and then what we can do is, we can create the response.json. We are going to intercept it, and then in the response.json I can have the message, and then I will have the error.message, and along with this I can also pass the stack trace. So let's have the stack trace. I will change this to capital, and then I can have the error.stack. So this we get it on the error object. And now if we go and try it, then let's go to our, okay, I will close this. I will close this as well. I will close the environment file as well. And now if we go and try, and I will send it. So in this case, you will see that we get a error message in the form of a JSON. So we have the message, all fields are mandatory, and this is the stack trace. So now you can make a condition that you need to display the stack trace on the dev environment, and or on the development environment, and then on the production you don't want it. So you can make this condition as well. So now we are going to use the stack trace. So you will see that it will also show us that in which file it has a problem, and it will show all the trace of our files. Now what I'm going to do is that if we go in our error handler, then in this case I need to pass some more information. So I will also need to pass the title, because I'm going to have the different kind of an error messages. It may be 400, it may be 401, 403. So we need to handle each of the error. So what I will do is, I'm going to have a title, and in the title I will say that it's not found. So I will have the not found. All right, I will save it. And now what I will do is, in case of a validation error, we are going to pass the 400. So for that, what I will do is I'm going to have here validation failed, and then we are going to have the error message, whatever error message we pass in our error object, and then we have this track trace. So what I will do is I'm going to write a switch case here. So let me have a switch statement, and then in the key I will pass the status code. So let's have the status code. And now here, if the status code is 400, then in that case what I need to pass is I need to pass that it's a validation failed. So I'm going to cut this and I'm going to add it. All right, I will save it. And now if the status code is 404 not found, then I'm going to have the case as 404, and then I'm going to pass this as my response. So I'm going to cut it and I'm going to pass it here. So what I will do is I'm going to create a constant file so that I can handle all my error codes. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to have the constants.js. And here what I will do is I'm going to have the exports.constant, and this will be an object, and here I will have my constants. So I will have the not found, which will be 404. Then I'm going to have the validation error, and that will be 400. Then I'm going to have the unauthorized, that will be 401. Then I'm going to have the forbidden, that will be 403, and then we are going to have the not found. So I have different HTTP error methods for the client, and now I can make use of this in our error handler. So what I will do is I'm going to import the constants first. So let's go here and I'm going to have the constant, and this constants will be coming from, let's have the require, and then I'm going to have the // constants. And here instead of 400, what I will do is I'm going to have the constants dot validation error. Here I'm going to change this to constants dot not found. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add the unauthorized as well as the forbidden. So here I'm going to have the unauthorized, here I'm going to have the forbidden, and I'm also going to add the error 500, which is the server error. So this will be the server error and this will be 500. All right, I will go back here, and for the unauthorized, what we are going to add is we are going to add the title as unauthorized. So let's change this to unauthorized, and then for forbidden, this will be forbidden, and then let's add the last one, which is the server error. And now this is going to be the server error. So let's have the server error, and I'm going to change this to server error. And in the default case, I'm simply going to have a console.log. So let's have a console log, and I'm going to write here no error, all good. All right, so now we have created our error handler middleware, and now we can throw the error in our controller whenever it is required. All right, so now the next thing we need to do is, now since we are going to use the MongoDB and the Mongoose, so whenever we interact with the MongoDB, we always get a promise. So in order to resolve that promise, what we will do is we are going to make use of an async await. So let's have the async here. I'm going to add the async on all the functions. All right, we have it async. But now, since whenever we use the async and if we want to catch an error, we need to make use of a try catch block. And in order to do that try catch block, we have to add the try catch block in each of the functions. But there is a better way to do this, and that's where we can make use of a middleware, which is an express async handler, which is going to handle our exceptions inside the async express routes, and then it's going to pass them to the express error handler, which we have created here. So for that, let's install the express async handler. So what I will do is I'm going to go here, and here I'm going to do an npm install express async handler, and this is going to install our express async handler. Now let's import that. So what I will do is I'm going to have a constant, I will have the async handler. So let's have the async handler, and this will be equals to the require, and it will be coming from the express async handler. And now in order to use the async handler, what we have to do is we need to wrap this complete async into this async handler function. So I'm going to have the async handler, and then I'm going to wrap this. All right, I will save it. Now we don't have to write all the try catch blocks in order to catch the errors. So async handler will automatically, whenever an exception is occurred, is going to pass it to the error handler. Now what I will do is I'm going to add it in all the functions. So let's add it here. I'm going to add it here. Let's add it here, and we can do similar on the other. All right, this is for the put, and the last one is the delete. So let's add for the delete. All right, so now we have added the async handler on all the functions in our controller. The next thing we need to do is we need to have the MongoDB database setup. So now let's do the MongoDB setup, and I will go to the browser. All right, and here we can type the MongoDB. So let's have the MongoDB. So this is the homepage of the MongoDB, and then we need to create an account which is a free. So I'm going to click on the sign in. You can use your Google account or GitHub account, or you can have your email address. So I'm going to click on the Google, and I'm going to use my Google account. All right, so this is going to take a while to sign in using the Google account. All right, I'm going to click on the accept, and I'm going to click on submit. All right, now you can fill this information like what is your goal. So I'm going to simply have the learn MongoDB, or I can build a new application, or let's have the explore what I can build. Then what type of application you are building. We are building some application related to, let's have a other, and then we are going to build a my contacts. All right, and then what is the preferred language? We are going to make use of a JavaScript. Then we are going to click on finish, and then we can choose the free plan, which is a shared. So I'm going to click on create here, and then here you can choose any of the cloud provider region. So let's keep it as it is. I'm going to choose the AWS. I'm going to have the region as let's change the region to Frankfurt. All right, and then I'm going to have the cluster. So we are going to keep as it is. We are not going to change anything, and it's free forever. Then we are going to have the additional settings. We don't have to do anything here, and in the cluster name we can give the cluster. So I'm going to give the cluster as the page cluster. All right, I'm going to click on create cluster. So now we have this. Now for the security quick start, we are not going to make any use of a certificates in order to connect to our database. So we are going to use the username and the password. So for the username and the password, I'm going to provide admin. Make sure you provide the secured password. So I'm going to click on the create user. Since my user is created, and then what I will do is, where would you like to connect from? I would like to connect from my local environment, and then here you can click on the add my current IP address. That is going to whitelist your IP address to access the database, and then you can click on finish and close. So now you will see that we have the database deployments, and it's creating our cluster. So it's going to take some time to create our cluster, so let's wait for it. So now you see that our cluster is ready, and if we go and do the browse collections, then right now we will not have any collection in our cluster. So collections is kind of you can think as a database, and inside the collections you can store the records in the form of a JSON object. Now what I will do is, I'm going to click on the add my own data, and for the database I'm going to have the my contacts backend, and for the collection we are going to have the collection of our contacts. So let's have the contacts. I'm going to click on the create, and now you will see that we have the collection as contacts. All right, so now we have created the database, and we also have the contacts collection. Now if you want to connect our database, what we can do is we can go to this, and we have a different solutions here. So we can use the Compass, Shell, or VS Code plugin. So I have a VS Code plugin. So if I click on it, and then we can download the VS Code plugin from here. And then once you have it, we can open it in your Visual Studio Code. So if I want to connect it, what I will do is, let's go to the overview, and I will go to the connect. And then here what I will do is we can click on the MongoDB Compass, and here I can copy this. All right, I will copy this, and now let's go to the Visual Studio Code. In the Visual Studio Code, if you have the plugin, then you have this icon, and then you can click on the add connection. In the add connection, you connect with a connection string. So I'm going to click here, and then we can add the connection string here. Since our database name is my contacts backend, and we have to change the password as well. So I will change the password as admin, and I will hit enter. Now you will see that connected to the cluster, we have it. And now if I expand this, then you will see that we have a database which is a my contacts, and we have the contacts. So currently we don't have any documents in our contacts, so we don't see it here. So whenever we add the contacts in our database, we are going to see it in our MongoDB plugin as well. So now we need to connect our application to the MongoDB database. So now let's go back to our browser, and here what we will do is I'm going to click on the connect, and this time I'm going to connect with the MongoDB native driver. So this is what we are going to use. So I'm going to copy this, and then I will go to the Visual Studio Code. Let's go to the application, and then here what we will do is I'm going to close all this error handler. I'm going to close the context, and here I'm going to create the environment variable, and let's add it here. So I'm going to add this here. Now I'm going to name it as the connection string. So let me have the connection string, and my connection string is this one. I'm going to change this to admin, and then here I'm going to add my database name. So my database name was my contacts backend. So oops, I made a mistake. So this will be before the question mark. I will save it. So now what we are going to do is let's create a new folder, and I'm going to name it as the config. So I'll come here, I'm going to create the new folder. I will change this to config. So let's have the config. And now in order to connect with our MongoDB database, we will need a Mongoose, which is a object model design schema for our entities like contacts or user, and it's help us to communicate with the MongoDB database. So for that, what I will do is I'm going to create a new file, and I will name it as dbconnection.js. Now let's go and install Mongoose. So I'm going to have the npm install Mongoose. So this is going to install Mongoose to our application. We can verify it with the package JSON, and we see that we have the Mongoose here. I'm going to import the Mongoose. So let me have the Mongoose. This will be equals to the require. I will have the Mongoose here. And then what I will do is I'm going to create a function which will be the connect db. I'm going to have an arrow function, and then inside that what I will do is this is going to be an async function. So let's add a async, and then I'm going to have a try, and then let's have a catch block that will catch the error, and if there is an error we will log the error. So let's log the error, and then if there is an error I just want to exit, so I will have the process exit, and I'm going to pass 1. I will also export this connection db. So what I will do is I'm going to have the module dot exports, and this will be equals to the connection db. And what we are going to do in a try block is we are going to create a constant connect, and that will be an await. We will have the mongoose dot we have a method which is a connect, and then we are going to pass our connection string. So that will be the process dot env dot connection string. So I'm going to copy this connection string, and I will add the connection string here. I will save it, and then when we have this connection established, let's have a console log so that we know that the connection to the database is established. So I'm going to have the database connected, and then I'm going to add some parameters here, so which will be the connect dot connection dot host. So if you are going to console log this connect, then you will see that you have some properties on this connect, and then you can add those here. So I'm going to have this, and I will also have the database name. So I will have the comma, and then I'm going to change this to name. I will save it, and now you will see that if I save it, then we don't see anything because we haven't used the connect db function at the moment. So let's go to our server. So I'm going to go to my server, and inside the server what I will do is I'm going to call this connect db. So this is my connect db, and I'm going to call it. I will save it, and now you will see that as soon as I save it, you will see here that we have in the console log database connected, and this is the database that we are connecting, and this is the host actually that we are connecting, and this is my database name. So we have successfully established the connection, and the next thing we are going to do is we are going to create the schema for our contacts. So now let's create the schema model for our contacts. So what I will do is I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to name it as models, and inside the models I will create a contact model. So let's go here and create a new file, and I'm going to have the contact model.js. Now we have the contact model. Now let's import the Mongoose. So we are going to have the Mongoose require Mongoose, and then we are going to create a constant and we will have the contact schema. So this schema will actually have all the values that we want in our contact resource. So I will have the contact, this will have the mongoose dot schema. Now we have an object inside that, and inside that object what we will do is we are going to have the fields that we want in our contact object. So first thing will be the name, all right, and the type will be a string. So let's have a type and I will change this to string. Then I will also have a required, so let's have the required because we need this, and then we will change a flag as true, and we will also pass in case of an error, please add the contact name. All right, I will save it. Now the other field we want is the email address, so let's have the email address, and I'm just going to do a copy paste, and I'm going to have the contact email address, and the other field will be the phone number. So let's have the phone here, and then it will also be a string, please add the contact phone number. So I'm going to change this to phone number. I will save it, and then we can also have the timestamp. So what I will do is I'm going to add the timestamp here. I will have the timestamps, and then I will have it true. And now what we need to do is we just need to do an export. So I will have the modules.export. We're going to have the mongoose.model, and then we can provide the name to this model. So let's have the name as contact, and we can have the contact schema. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to add it. All right, I will save it. Okay, so now we have created the Mongoose object. So now the next thing we will do is we are going to apply our CRUD operations, and let's store the data in the real database. So I'm going to go to my contacts. So now let's start with the get contacts. So first we have to import the model. So I will have the contact, and this will be equals to the require. I will have the quotes dot slash. I will have the models, and inside the models we will have the contact model. Now we have the contact model, and now what we will do is I'm going to have the constant contacts, and this contacts will be equals to the contact model dot, and it exposes some methods to us so that we can establish a communication with the database. So what I will do is I'm going to have the find, and then after that what we can do is we can copy this contacts, and then we can pass this contacts as the JSON. Now let's give a try. So I'm going to close this, and let's close this as well. We don't want this as well. And if we go back here, if I go to the get and if I send a request, so we see that the request is still processing. So let's cancel this and let's go back, and we see that we have the contacts and we are using the async, but we haven't used the await here. So let's use the await. Now let's go back and let's give a try, and then you will see that we have an empty array. So right now we don't have any contacts in our database. So now let's go and create a new contact. So what I will do is here we have the async handler. We have the request body is request.body. We are going to go here and let's have a post, and let's add the body here. So I'm going to have the name as the page. Let's have the email address. So the email address will be the page @gmail.com, and then let's add the phone. So let me add the phone, and the phone will be let's add some random. And now if we go back to our controller, then in the case if we want to create a new contact, so we will see that first we will have a check. If the name, email and the phone is empty, then we throw an error. But if they are not empty, then what I will do is I'm going to create a contact object. Then I'm going to create, but if they are not empty, then I'm going to create a constant with a contact, and then I'm going to create a contact. So let's have the await, and then I'm going to have the contact model dot create, and then I'm going to pass the object. In the object I'm going to pass the name, and this name will be equals to the request.body.name. But I have already destructured it, and since in the ES6 if the key and the value are same, we can just use the key. Then we are going to have the email, and then we are going to have the phone. I will save it. And then once it is created, then in that case, what we can do is we can have the response.status 201 JSON, and then we are going to pass the contact that we have created. So let's pass the contact. I will save it. Now let's go to the new request, and now let's fire a request. I will send it, and then you will see that we have created a new contact. Name is the page, email, phone number, we have the ID which is auto generated from the MongoDB, and then we have the created at and the updated at the timestamps. Now if we go here and if we want to check, then we see that we have the context, and in the context you see that we have a record, and this is the record that is stored in our collection. Now let's go back to our code. I will close this. Let's minimize this. And now let's work on the get contact. So if we want to get an individual contact, then we can just use the find by ID. So let's go here, and what I will do is I'm going to have a constant contact, and this will be equals to the await. Let's have the contact model dot find by ID, and we can pass the ID with the request dot param dot ID. If we don't find any of the contact, then we are going to throw an error that a contact is not found. So what I will do is I'm going to have if we have the contact, then in that case what we want is we want the response dot status would be 404 not found, and then we will have to throw an error. So let's throw an error with new error, and then we are going to have the contact not found. But if we find the contact, then we are going to return the contact. So let me have the contact. I will save it. All right, so now let's go and let's give a try. So if I go back here, I will fetch all the contacts, and then I want to get this individual contact. So I will get the ID. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to pass the ID here, and then I'm going to send the request. Now you will see that I get an individual object with the ID. Now let's make a change here. I'm going to change it to 9, and then I'm going to send it. So in this case, you will see that not found, contact not found. We don't have any contact associated with this ID. So now let's do the next one, which is the update contact. So in order to update a contact, first we need to fetch a contact. So I'm going to copy this as it is, and then if we find the contact, then I'm going to have the updated contact. So I'm going to have the constant updated contact, and this updated contact will be having a await. So I can have the contact model dot, then I will have the find by ID and update. And inside this, what I have to pass is I want to pass the ID which I want to update. So I will have the request dot param dot ID. The next will be the new body which I want to update, which is the request dot body, and then I also need to pass I need to pass a query option which will be the new, and I'm going to have it as true. I will save it, and then once we get it, then what we are going to do is we are going to have a response dot status, and then we can actually pass the updated contact to the user. So I'm going to have the updated contact. All right, I will just copy this. So now we have the updated contact. Let's go and let's give a try. So this was my contact. So if I click, I will get the contact. Sorry, the contact is not found. So I will change back the ID, which was 8, and we have the contact. Now I want to update this contact with the new information. So I will have the page malvia, and I will also have my email as the page.malvia. Oops. So the page.malvia. I will make a put request, and let's click on send. And you will see that as soon as I send it, the record is updated with the page malware. And now let's go and let's get the record. So we will get the new updated record. And the last one is we need to do is the delete in our CRUD operation. So let's go and let's do a delete. So for delete also, first we need to fetch the contact which is available in the database. So let's go and let's copy that. All right, we have the contact. If we don't find the contact, we throw that contact not found. And if the contact is available, then in that case, we will just do a remove. So what I will do is I'm going to have the await contact dot remove. So we have the remove. All right, I will remove the contact, and then I will just pass the contact which we have removed. So I'm going to go and change this to here. I will save it. Now let's go and let's try. So I'm going to click, we get the contact. Now I'm going to delete this contact. So let's go and let's delete it. I'm going to click on delete, and you will see that it's 200. Okay, that means the contact is deleted. And now if I try to fetch this contact, then I should not be able to get it. Should get that contact not found, and you will see that we have the contact not found. So now we have done the CRUD operations. We have done the read, write, delete, and update. And we have also done the connection with the database, and all the contacts are stored in the database in the form of documents under the collections. So now the next thing what we have to do is now we need to introduce the authentication. So now let's start with the authentication module. And in the authentication, what we will do is we are going to provide some endpoints which will help us a user to register themselves and then log in. And once they log in, they can use a access token, and then with the help of the access token, they can manage their contacts. So now let's start with the routing first. So what I will do is I'm going to go to my server.js, and inside the server.js, I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to add here. And this time our API URL will be the users, as we are going to register the user, and then we are going to have a login user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to the user routes. So let's have the user routes, and now let's go and create the user routes file. So I will go to my routes, and inside the routes, I'm going to create a new file which will be the user routes.js. So now in the user route.js, let's first import the express. So I'm going to have the constant, I will have the express, and this will be equals to the require, and I will have the express, and then I'm going to have the router. So let's have the router, and this router will be coming from the express.router method. So I'm going to call the router method. Now let's create the route. So what I will have is I'm going to have the router.post, and on this post I will have the register, and when we have the register, we are going to have the request response, and then we can have the response.json, and this response can be, I will have the message, and I will have the register the user, and then we can have a login endpoint, so that will help our users to log in. So I'm going to have the login, and I will also create one more endpoint that will give the information of the current user. So let's have a /current. All right, I'm going to change this to login user. So let me have the login user, and I will change this to current user information. So let's have the current user information, and now let's give a try. So I will go back here, and here instead of this, I'm going to have the users/register, and I'm going to send. So I see that we get an error, so it should be a post request. So now let's send it, and we still see an error. So probably let's see that our application is running or not. So I'm going to open the terminal, and here what we see is that we have an error, and the error is express.router is not a function. All right, so we made a mistake. Now let's go to the user route, and this should be capital R. Now I will save it, and we still have an error. Now let's go and fix that. In the server.js on line number 13, we have an error. So I will go to the server.js, and on line number 13, we have an error that there is no user route. So we need to export the user route. So let's go here, and let's have the module.export, and I'm going to export the router. All right, so that it is now available in my server.js. Now everything works fine. Let's go and let's check. So if I go to this URL, API users register, and if I make a send, then we see that we have registered the user. Similarly, let's go and check for the login, and I see that we have the login, and then let's have the current user. So if I click, then we see the current user. But since the current user should be a get request and not post, so let's go and let's make this change. So it should be a get request. All right, so now the next thing we will do is we are going to create the controller for the users. So let's go to the controller, and let's create the user controller.js. So I will go here, I will have the user controller.js, and then in the user controller.js, what we can do is we can just do simply a copy paste of this, and I'm going to have it here. And the first thing we are going to have is to register a user. So let's have a register a user, and we are going to have a post method. This will be users/register, and this will be a public access, so anyone can access the endpoint and then register the user. We will change this to register user. Oops, so this will become register user, and inside this one we can now remove this, and we can go to the user route, and we can cut this, and we can add that in the controller. So let's go here and let's add in the controller. I will save it. And now let's go and export it. So I will have the module dot export, and then we will export the registered user. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to add it here. Now we will also need to import it in the user routes. So we can import it. So let's have the register user, and you will see that it gets auto imported. So now we have to create the login user as well. So let's go to our controller back, and I'm going to copy this. I will add it here, and I will change this to login user. So this will be login user. I will have the login user. This will be a post API, and the endpoint will be the login. It will also be a public endpoint, and then we can change this. So let's go here, and I'm going to cut this, and let's add that in our controller. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to add it here, and I'm going to export the login user as well. Now the third one is the current info of the user. So what we will do is let's create one more method. All right, and this time this method will be a private method. So only a logged in user can get the current information of a user. So now this will change to the current user info. The endpoint will now change to current. It will be a private, and here I'm going to have the current user. Let's cut this. So I'm going to cut this and I will add it here. So let me add that here and I will save it. We are going to now export the current user. So let's add the current user and let's import the current user here. So I'm going to import the current user, and I will also import the login user. Now let's copy the login user and provide the login user function here. And for the current user, I'm going to provide the current user here. I will save it, and we see that we get an error. So let's go and see what the error is. So in the user controller, line number 4. So let's go to the user controller, and on the line number 4, we see that I don't see any error, but what is the error? It says async handler is not defined, and we need to import the async handler. So what we will do is I'm going to have the constant async handler, and this will be equals to the require, and I will have the express async handler. All right, I will save it. So now everything should work fine. We see that now we don't see the error, and what I will do is I'm going to close this contact controller and also close the contact model, and now let's give a try. So if I run it, then we'll still see that we get the correct response, register the user. So now we have created it. Now the next thing what we have to do is we need to make the functionality for register the user, and for that first we have to create the user model. So let's go and create the user model. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to create a new file, and let's name it as the user model.js. And in the user model.js, let's import the Mongoose. This will be equals to the require, and I'm going to add the Mongoose here. Then I'm going to create a constant with user schema, and this will be equals to the mongoose.schema, and this will be an object. And what values we will need in order to register a user? The first property I need is the username. So let's have the username, and this username will be of type string. So I will have the username of type string. Then I will have the, I misspelled the type. Then I will have the required, and yes, this fill is required, so I'm going to have it as true, and I will have a message as please add the user name. The second field is we need to have an email address of the user to register the user. So for that I will have a type as string, and then I will have the required field. So let me have the required, and the required will have the flag as true, and then the message is please add the user email address. I'm also going to add one more property, which is the unique, so that I need a unique email address every time when a user is registered. So no duplicate user with the same email ID can register themselves. So I will add a property called unique. I will have the flag as true, and then whenever someone try to register themselves with the same email address, what I will have a message that email address already taken, so that we can prevent them to register twice with the same email address. And we will also need the password. So let's have the password fill. I will have the type as string. All right, then I will have the required field. So let's have the required, and it will have a flag as true, and I will have the please add the user password. All right, I will save it and I will just change this to small l. And then we will also need the timestamp. So let's add the timestamp. So I'm going to have the timestamps and I will have it as true. And then what we can do is now we can use the module export and we can export the schema. So I will have the module exports and this will be equals to the mongoose dot model, and let's name the model as user. So I will have the user and then I can have the user schema. So now we have created the model as well. The next thing what we can do is now let's write the functionality in order to register a user. So I will go to my controller, and whenever a user wants to register themselves, they need to provide the username, email address, and the password in the request body. So what we are going to do is let's destructure those information. So what I will do, I will have a constant. I will have the username, the email address, and the password of the user. And all these three fields, we will get it from the request.body. And once we have it, we're going to make a check that if the username is not empty, or the email is not empty, or the password is not empty. So I will have it, and in that case what we will do is we are going to send a response status as 400. So the validation is failed, and we will throw an error actually. So I will have the throw new error. So we will have an error object, and then we will have all fields are mandatory. So before creating a user, what we will see is we are first going to check that whether with the particular email address, do we already have an existing user in our database or not. So what I will do is I'm going to have a constant user available, and then I can make use of an await keyword, and then we can use the user model in order to interact with our MongoDB database. So let's import the user model first. So I will have the constant user, and this will be equals to the require. Then I'm going to have the // models / user model, and we can now have the await. We can use the user model, and then we can do a find one, and this is going to help us to find a user which is already have in our database with the email address. So let's use this email address and check. So I'm going to add it here. And now if we have the email address, so we need to pass the email address in an object. So let me have an email address as an object. And now if we find this user available, so let's go here and let's have a check on that. So if we have a user, then in that case we are going to throw an error, which will again be a validation error, and we will have a status as 400, and this time the message will be that user already registered. And then what we will do is if we don't find any user, then in that case we are going to create a new user in our database. So before creating a new user, what we have to do is we are accepting the username, email address, and the password from the client. But since the password is a raw password and we cannot store the raw password into our database, so for that we need to hash our password. And in order to hash the password, we are going to make use of a library called bcrypt. So let's import the bcrypt library. So if we go to the package.json, we see that we don't have a bcrypt library. So I'm going to open a new terminal, and then I'm going to install the bcrypt. So let me have the npm install bcrypt, and I will hit enter. So now we have the bcrypt library, and now let's go and use that. So what I will do is I'm going to import the bcrypt. So let me have a constant bcrypt. This will be equals to require, and then I will have the bcrypt, and you will find this bcrypt documentation on the npm official documentation, but I will show you how we can use it. So it's very simple to use it, and what we have to do first is we need to create the hash password. So I will have the hash password, and how we are going to create is I'm going to create a constant with an hashed password, and this will be equals to, so bcrypt is also going to provide us a promise, so that's why we are going to use an async await, and I will have the bcrypt dot hash, and then in this we first need to pass the raw password. So our raw password is available in the password, and then we can provide the salt rounds. So this 10 is just the number of salt rounds that we want for the hashing of the password. So you can use this, and now if we do a console.log, then we will be able to see the hashed password. So let me have the hashed password. All right, and then I'm going to use the hash password. I will save it. And then what we are going to do is let's go and check first. So if I go back here and we have the post register, and in order to register a user, what I will have is I will have the user name. Okay, and let's have the username as the Malvia. Then I will have the email address, and we don't need a phone. We will have a password, and I'm going to give the password as 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now I'm going to click on send, so we can see the logs. And when I click on send, you will see that we have the hashed password. So this is the hash password we are going to store in the database so that we can prevent, or we can have the security of the user password. So now let's go back to the user controller, and now we already have the hashed password. And what we will do is now we can create a new user. So I want to create a new user. So let's have a constant of the user. I will have the user model, and that will give me an access to create. And whenever I want to create a user, what I will have is I'm going to have the username, I will have the email, and then I'm going to have the password. So let's have the password, and the value of the password will not be password. We are going to use the hashed password. I will save it. And then what we can see is once a user is created, so I will do a console log of the user so that we know that a user is created successfully. So I will have the user created. I'm going to have the $user. And now we need to send the information to the user. So whenever we need to send the information to the user, I don't want to send the complete user because this will also contain my hash password. So what I will do is now if we have a successful user created, then in that case I want to have the response.status as 201, that is the resource is created. And then I'm going to pass the JSON data, and I want to pass the ID. So I will have the user.id, and then I will also pass the user email address. So let me have the email address, and this will be the user.email address. And if there is a problem, then in that case what we will do is I'm going to throw an error. So I will have here, and I will have the response.status as 400. All right, and then let's throw an error. So I will have the new error object, and I will say that user data is not valid. So that means the request was not valid. So that's why we were not able to create the new user. All right, so now we have done this. If we want to test it, what we can do is we can go to our new request, and here we can try to test it. So I can go and send a request, and you will see that when I send a request, I get a response back as status 201 created. So my resource, which is a particular user, is already created in the database, and in response to that I get the ID of my user, which is created, and then the email address. Now if I try to submit it once again, then in that case we are going to get an error, and that is because the user already registered, and we have made a check here. So if you will see that if we have a user, and if we find it one in with the help of the email address, we throw an error that the user is already registered. And now if we want to verify that in our database, then we can go to our MongoDB. So let me go to the MongoDB, and this is our collection, and inside the users, if we go, and then we will see that this is the user we just have created. So this is what we have now, the registered user. We now need to create an endpoint for the login, so that whenever a user is login, we get an access token. And for that, we are going to make use of a JSON Web Token. So let's go back in our Visual Studio Code. And here what we will do is, before using the JSON Web Token, I want to go to the JSON Web Token website, and I want to show you something. So I will go to the JSONWebToken.io. And then what we will do is whenever we have a JSON Web Token, so this is sample JSON Web Token, and you will see that it contains 3 parts. The first part is actually the header algorithm of the token. So it's have a algo type of HS256, and it's a type of web token. Now the next piece of information, which is in the pink color, that is actually the payload, and that payload we are going to have the user information that we are going to add in our token. So, and the third part, you will see it's the signature verification. So this is how a JSON Web Token is, and it consists of 3 different parts. Now let's go and let's add it in our application. So what I will do is, let's go and first install the JSON Web Token. So I'm going to have the npm install JSON web token. Now, if we go to the package JSON, we should be able to see the JSON web token. All right, so now let's work on the login functionality or the login endpoint. So if we go to the user controller, and in the login endpoint, what we want is whenever a client is sending the email address and the password, in that case, we need to match the password, and then we provide the user back with a access token. So what I will do is I'm going to have a constant, and then I'm going to have the JWT, and then I will have the require, and this will have the JSON web token. And then I'm going to go to my login function. So this is the login user function. And whenever a user is trying to log in, they send in the request body the email address and the password. So let's fetch the email address and the password first. So what I will do is I'm going to have a constant. I will have the email, and then I will have the password. Then this will be equals to the request dot body, and then we will just make a check that if we don't have an email or we don't have a password, I misspelled the password, then in that case we need to the response status as 400. There is a validation failure, and then let's throw an error. So I will have the new error, and then we will have all fields are mandatory. But if we have a proper email address and the password, then in that case, first we need to find that whether there is a user in the database or not. So what I will do is I'm going to have a constant user, and then I will have the await. We are going to use the user model, and then we will use the find one. Then we are going to pass an email address, and this will help us to identify that user is already present in the database or not. Once we have the user, then we need to compare the password which is stored in our database and the password which we have received from the client. So what we will do is let's have the compare password with hashed password. And what we can do is it's very easy to compare. First, we need a user, and along with that, we will also make a check on the password. So in order to do that, we can use the bcrypt method, which is a compare. So let's use that bcrypt dot compare, and then we are comparing the password which we received from the client in the request body with the hashed password. So that will be the user dot password, and this user is the user that we are stored in our database and which we are retrieving here. We have the user, we can now compare the password with the user dot password, and if this matches, in that case what we need to do is we need to provide an access token in the response. So what we will do is we are going to have a response dot status, and the status will be 200, and then we are going to have a JSON, and in the JSON we are going to pass the access token. So let's have the access token. Now we need to know what is this access token is. Now this is where we are going to use the JSON web token. So now let's have and create this access token. So what we will do is let's create a constant with an access token, and then we can use the JWT which we have imported here, JWT, and it has a method of sign in. We need to sign a new token for our user. So what I will do is I'm going to have the JWT dot sign in, and this JWT dot sign in is going to take few parameters. So it will be an object, and we need to provide the payload. So if we go back to our browser, then you will see that we have a payload, and inside this payload we can actually pass the information which we want in our token. So let's go back, and here what I want is my payload will be the user information which I want to embed, but I don't want to embed the user password. So what I will do is I will have a user object as my payload, and then I will embed the username. So this username will be equals to the user dot username. I will also have the email address which will be equals to the user dot email, and then I'm going to have the ID which will be equals to the user dot ID. So this is my payload which I'm going to embed in my token. Now the next thing is we have to provide an access token secret. So in order to get the access token secret, what we can do is we can just define a unique access token secret in our environment variable file. So let's go to the environment variable file, and here what I will do is I can simply have the access token. So I will have the access token secret, and then you can define a unique secret key value here. So for now, what I will do is I'm going to simply add the page 123 as the secret, but you should not do it when you do a production level code. So what we'll do is I'm going to go to the user controller, and here I can use the access token secret. So in order to fetch a value from the environment variable, we can make use of a process core module, and then we are going to have an env. We will have the access token secret. So I'm going to just copy this. All right, let's add it here. Okay, so now we have that, and there is one more property which we need to pass, and that is the expiration time of our token. So we are generating a token, but we need to also provide the expiration date of that token, so that after this token is expired, users should not be able to use the token in order to call the APIs. So what we will do is we are going to set the expiry time, and let's set the expiry time as 1 minute. So this is just for the testing purpose. We are going to set the expiration time as 1 minute. And once we have this, we have the access token, and let's pass the access token as a response. And if there is a error, then we will have an else, and what we will do is we will have the response dot status of 401, and that will be that email or the password is not valid. So the thing is that if this is not true, that means we don't find a user, or we don't match the user provided password with the stored password. Then in that case, there is a problem with the credentials, and we are going to pass 401, and let's throw an error. So I'm going to throw in an error. So let's have an error object, and then I will have a message as email or password. Oops, I made a mistake. Password is not valid. All right, I will save it, and now I can just remove this. So I'm going to remove this, and I will save it. Now let's give a try. So what we will do is I will go in the new request, and here instead of the register, I will have the login, and I'm just going to remove this username. And now let's send the request. So if I click on the send, then you will see that we have the access token. So now we are able to get the access token. Now what we can do is we can use this access token and can access all our private routes. If we go to the contact controller, then you see that we have all the public routes, and now we are going to make this as a private route. So the next thing what we are going to do is we are going to make all our public routes as a private routes, and we are going to enforce a validation on those public routes. So only authenticated user can access those private routes. So what we will do is first let's start with the user controller, and in the user controller we will first go with the current user info. Now to access this endpoint, the current user info, we need an access token. I mean, the client has to pass an access token so that only authenticated user will be able to access this route. So what we will do is let's go to the user routes, and in the user routes what we have to do is, but before we do anything in the user routes, we need to make a middleware which is going to help us to validate the token which a client is sending in our request as a bearer token. So what we will do is I will go here and I'm going to change this to current, and then what a client will do, I mean the user is going to have this token, and they are going to pass the token in the bearer section, and I will send it here. And then when a user sends the request, I have to validate this token. I have to verify that the token is a correct token and it is associated with a correct user. So for that, what we will do is we are going to create a middleware so that where we can verify the token. So I'm going to create a new file, and then I will have the validate token handler.js. And in this, what we will do is first let's import the async handler. So I will have the async handler, and this will be require. I will have the express async handler. And then the next thing is we will also need the JWT JSON web token. So let's import that, and I will have the require, and then I will have the JSON web token. I'm going to create a constant validate token function. So I will have the async handler, and inside the async handler what I will do is I'm going to have the async, and we are going to have the request response. and then we will have the next. So this is a middleware, and you will see that we have a very similar middleware as error handler also, and in the error handler also we have the request, response, and the next, and we also have the error. Now what I will do is I'm going to create a token variable here, and then what we will do is whenever a user is sending a request, the token is actually passed in the header section with the auth field. So either you can pass it here as a bearer token, or you can have an authorization field here. So you can also create a new value which will be an authorization. And then in the value, what you can do is you can use the bearer, and then you can add the token here. So either you do this way or we pass it here. In both the cases, we should be able to manage to have a check on our backend. So what I will do is let auth header, and this will be equals to the request dot headers dot authorization. So if we have this kind of an authorization, so I will copy and I will add it here. Or if a user is having an authorization like this, so I'm going to copy, and then if a user have an authorization like this, so in both the cases we will have the auth header. And now what we will do is that if we have this auth header, then in that case we will also make a check that we have an auth header that starts from, so I will have the starts with, and our authorization header always starts with a bearer. So we need to have the auth in a bearer token. So what we will do is we are going to go and check for the bearer keyword. So if we have bearer, then in those cases what we need to do is let's extract the token first. So we are going to have the token variable, and we need to extract from the auth header. So what I will do is I'm going to make use of a split, and then I will split with a space bar. So if we go here, and you will see that we have a bearer and then we have a space. So let's split it with the space bar, and then we are going to use the value of the first index. So if we go here, the 0th index will contain the bearer, and the first index will contain the token. So that's where we use the first index. We have the token, and now what we need to do is we need to verify this token. So to verify, we will use the JWT dot verify, and then we need to pass the token. We also need to pass the access key. So process dot env dot access token key. So I'm going to go here, I will copy, and I will add it here. And the third parameter will be a callback function. So this will have an error, and then we will have a decoded user or decoded information. Now if we have an error, then in that case we will have a response status as 401, and we are going to throw an error. So let's throw an error. So I'm going to have a new keyword, and then we are going to throw an error as user is not authorized. So we are trying to verify the token, but user has given a token which is not a valid token, or he is using a token from some other users. So in that case, we are going to say that user is not authorized. But if a user is using a correct token, then we are going to get the user information. So what we will do is let's have a console.log, and I will log the decoded, and I will save it. Now what we can do is, in order to make use of this validate token, we can go to the user routes. So first let's export this. So I will have the module dot export, and this will be equal to the validate token. So I'm going to have the validate token here. All right, I will save it. And then what we will do is let's go to the user route, and in the user route I can make use of a validate token, because since only current user was the private route, so I will have here the validate token. It's auto imported. Now let's go and let's give a try. So I will have a API slash user slash current, and when I send a request, then we see that we have a 404, and that is because the endpoint for the user current has a get method. So let's change this to get, and I will also go here and let's send the request. And since we send the request, we see the user is not authorized. That means the token is either an expired token or the token is not a valid token. So we first need to fetch a new token. So what I will do is I'm going to create a new request. So let's go to the client. I will have a new request, and I will just copy this. All right, I will add it here, and I will just do a login of the user first. So let's log in the user. All right, I need to pass the body. So whenever I need to log in, I will have the email address as the page. Oops, I don't remember the email address. And then I will have the password as 123456. So let's go and check the email address. So I will go here. I will have the email address address. So I'm going to copy the email address and let's add the email address here. And this will be the email. This will be the password. So we have the request body now. Let's go and let's send it and we get the access token. Now let's copy the access token and now let's use the current, which is a protected route. So I'm going to go to my, I will just remove this. I will go to the auth and I will add my token here. And now I will send the request. And you see that when I send the request, what we see is this is the decoded user we have. So we have logged the decoded user, but we also see that cannot set the headers after they are sent to the client. So we are doing some mistake here. And what we will do is let's go to our validate token. So I'm going to go to my validate token here. And we have the decoded user here. So what we will do is in the decoded user, we can have the decoded.user, which will give us the user information. So this is the user. So what I will do is I will append this on my request.user, and then I will have this decoded.user. So what I have done here is that I have verified the token and I have extracted the information which was embedded in the token. So the information which was embedded in the token was this one, the user information, the expiry and the creation of the token. And then I have taken the decoded.user and this information, I have attached this information to my request.user property. And then I'm going to have the next. So this is the middleware. So I'm just going to intercept the request. I'm going to decode the token and then I'm going to append the user information on the request body, not on the request body, but on the request.user property. And now we will also make a check that if this we don't have a token, then in that case, that means the token is not provided or the token is or the user is not authorized. So let's have a response.status as 401. And we will throw an error. So I will have the throw new error and the error will be that user is not authorized or token is missing in the request. I will save it. All right, now let's go and give it a try. So I will go back here and then I'm going to send it. So I'm sending it and I see the token is expired. So let's go and have a new token. All right, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to add it here. So in the bearer token, let's add it. And now I'm going to send. And you see that the current user information, since we are not fetching the information from our database, but this is a protected route. So if you don't have an access token, you will not be able to access this route. So now we have successfully verified the JSON web token and we have also used it on a private route. Now what we need to do is whenever someone is requesting the current user information, we need to go to the database in the MongoDB and then we need to fetch the information and then provide it as a response. So let's go to our user controller back. And here what we will do is I'm going to go and I will remove this. And here I'm going to have the request.user and that will give me the user information, because if we go to the validate token, then we extract the user information and we put it as request.user. So when we have the request, in that case, we will just send the request.user. So let's go and let's do. So I'm going to send the request, and since the token expired, let's have a new token. I'm going to copy this. Let's use the token in the auth and I'm going to send it. And you see that this is the information of my current user. The username is dmalvia, email address, and then I have the ID. All right. So the next thing what we need to do is we need to protect all our contacts route. So only a logged in user will be able to create, delete, update, and read the contacts which they have created for themselves. So what we will do is first we need to associate, whenever you create a new contact, we need to associate that contact with the user ID who is creating it. So let's go in the contact model, and in the contact model we need to update this model. So what I will do is I'm going to add a new property, and this new property will be the user ID, and this ID will be for the user who is creating the contact. And what we will do is we are going to have a type of this, and the type of this ID will be the mongoose.schema.types.object ID, because this ID is actually created in the MongoDB, and that's where we have the object ID. And then we are going to use is as required. So whenever you create a new contact, we need to always have an user ID. So that's how it will be associated with the particular user. So I'm going to have it as true, and I need to provide the reference of the model. So the model is user. So we have made this first change, and now what we have to do is the next thing, we need to go to our contact controller and we need to make all the routes as private. So I will go to the contact controller and let's change this to private. I'm going to copy, I'm going to add it here, I will also add it here, then I will also add it here, and then I will also add it here. All right, we have it. And now let's use the validate token as a middleware for all the routes which we have. So if we go to the contact routes, then in the contact routes, what we will do is we are going to make use of a validate token. So this validate token will be used for all the routes. So we are not going to use here validate token for each of the method, but what we will do is we will have the router dot use. So we are going to use a validate token on all the routes, and this get auto imported. So this is also one of the way you can do it if you have all the routes as protected route and you need to validate the token on all the routes, or if you have only some of the routes, then in that case you can make use like this. All right, so now let's go to the contact controller, and in the contact controller now let's make use of the user ID and then we do the CRUD operations. So the first we will start with that I need to find my contacts. So I need to find all the contacts with the user who is logged in. So we need to fetch all the contacts of a logged in user. So for that what we will have is we are going to have the user ID, and this will be equals to the request.user.id, and I will save it. And this user ID is the one we have just added in our contact model. So this is the user ID. So now if we go and try, but before trying it, what I want to do is I don't want my token to get expire every time. So I will increase the expiration time of my token. So I will go to the user controller, and in the user controller we are set as 1 minute. So let's make it as 15 minutes. And now I will go here and I will first log in with the token. So I'm going to log in. All right, then I'm going to have my token, and then what I will do is I'm going to have my contact, and then I'm going to pass this token, and now I'm going to fetch all the contacts which are created by the username Dipesh Malviya. So I'm going to send it, and we see that we get an empty arrays because right now there is no contact being created for this user which is Dipesh. Now the user which is Dipesh is going to create some contacts. So if we want to create the contacts, we are going to have a post request, and in the post request what we will do is let's have a name, and my contact is John. So let me create a contact which is a John Day, and the email address of John Day is just john@gmail.com, and then we have a phone. So let me have a phone, and I will have 1 2 3, oops, I will have 098 something something something. So this is the contact which the page wants to create it. So we also have a valid token, and now if we send it, we should be able to create it. So let's go to our controller first, and not in the user controller, we need to go to our, let's close the package.json, let's close the environment variable file, let's close the contact model, and we now only interested in the contact controller. Now in the contact controller, whenever we want to create a new contact, what we need is we need to have the name, email, and phone number, but along with that we will also need to associate the user ID who is creating this. So what I will do is I'm going to have the user ID, and this user ID will be equals to the request.user.id. Since we are using this as a middleware, whenever we have a request, this middleware is going to decode the token, and then it's going to add the request.user property, and in the request.user property we will find the ID, and then we can now create this contact. All right, let's go and let's give a try. I will save it, and now I will go and create it. So if I send the request, now you will see that this is the user ID of the page, and the page now have created a contact for with the name as John Day. And now what we can do is we can create multiple contacts for the page. So the next contact I'm going to create is Nikesh G, and then the email address is Nix, and I'm going to change this phone number, and then I'm going to send, and you see that we have created a contact. Now if I want to see all the contacts which the page has created, then I'm going to send request, and you will see that we have 2 contacts which is created by the page. Now what I will do is I'm going to create a new user, and then I'm going to see that the new user is able to get all these contacts or not. So let's go back here and let's register a new user. So I will have a new user. So I will do the register, and I'm going to pass the user name, and the username this time will be let's have a user as Mark. So Mark is another user, so we will have the email address as mark@gmail.com, and then I'm going to send it, and we see that now a new user is created, which is Mark. Now let's log in with Mark. So I'm going to log in with Mark, so I will change the URL as login, and I'm going to just remove this. All right, I will send the request, and we get an access token. So I'm going to copy the access token, and now what I'm trying to do is, so now this access token is for the user the page, and if he send the request, he has created 2 contacts. But now I want to change this for token for a Mark, and now this token belongs to Mark, and if I send a request, then you will see that we don't have any contacts because Mark doesn't created any new contacts for himself. So this is how we are preventing cross user trying to access the contacts for other users, and that's where the authentication is done. The next thing we need to do is we need to update and delete the contact for a user. So let's go to the contact controller back, and here what we will do is whenever we need to get a contact, we can get the contact with the help of a request.param.id. but if we want to update the contact, what we will do is first we are going to fetch the contact from our database with the help of the ID, and then this contact will contain the user ID of a user who has created. So what we will do is before updating the contact, we will make a check, and the check will be that if the contact which we have just fetched has .user id to string, and if this not equals to the request.user.id, then in that case we will know that a different user is trying to update a contact of another user. So what we will do is we are going to throw an error. So I will have the response.status, and the status will be 403 because a user is not authorized to update a contact of another user. And then I will throw an error. So I will have the new error, and then I will have the error as user don't have permission to update other user contacts. So we have handled that case, and if it matches, so the contact.user id matches with the request.user id, then in that case we are going to simply update the contact. And we need to do a very similar thing for the delete also. So I'm going to copy this. In the delete also, we first fetch the contact from the database. We have the contact, we check that if the contact is found, then in that case we remove it. But before removing it, we need to check that the contact which we found has a user ID, and that user ID should match with the request.user.id. And then we will have, oops, we made a mistake. So user don't, and this will also user don't. So now we have protected all our CRUD operations of the contacts with the JSON web token. And now if we go and simply do a testing of it, then we see that this token is for the Mark. And if we let's go and let's get the token for the page again. So what I will do is I'm going to have page, and I will send a request. Oops, the email ID and the password is wrong, so probably the email ID will be the page.malvia. All right, now we have the token. Now using this token, I want to see that what all contacts this particular user has. So this user has 2 contacts. Now a user want to update this contact, so I'm going to copy this. Let's have a contact here. If I go to the body, then I will have an updated contact as Nikesh Gadekar, and I will make it updated. I will send it, and you will see that we have a contact, but we made a mistake because it's a get, and we need to make a put in order to update it. And now I will send it, and as soon as I send it, you will see that the contact is updated, Nikesh Gadekar update. Now what I will do is I'm going to remove this, then I'm going to make a get, and we get the contacts back with an updated contact. Now I want to delete this contact, so I'm going to copy this, and let's have here, and I'm going to delete. So let me have this, and I'm going to send the request, and you will see that it's 200, and hopefully this contact is deleted now. So if I go and try to do a get on it, then I should not be able to find the contact. So we see that the contact not found. Now what we will do is let's go and let's fetch all the contacts back. So we don't have any contact. So there is a problem. So what we have done is, if we go here and if we see, then what we are doing is we are doing the contact.remove, and that is removing all the contacts from our database. But we only want to remove the contact for which the user is passing the ID. So what we will do is we will have to make a change here, and we are going to have a delete one, and which ID we need to delete is we're going to have the underscore, and then we are going to have the request.param.id, param.id. Now let's give a try. So what I will do is first I'm going to create some contacts. So I will go here and I will send a post. All right, a contact is created. Let's create another contact. So I will have the next contact as John Day, and then I'm going to have this as John, and then I will send it. So now if I go and fetch, then we see that we have two contacts. And now I want to delete this Nikesh Gadegar updated. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to add it here, and then I'm going to go and do delete, and I will send it. So we see that, okay, it's 200 and the contact is deleted. So if we go and do a get, we should have contact not found. But if we want to fetch all the contacts, we still should have the John Day. So you see that we have the John Day. So now we have fixed the problem with the contact.remove. So we should use the contact.delete one. So we have created all the CRUD API of the contacts. So we can now make use of the contacts API, and then we can manage the contact based on the user. So we also have a register user, login user, and then once a user is logged in, he can create, update, delete, and read all the contacts which he has created. And similarly, we can now have multiple users and they can manage their own contacts. So that's all I have in this video. I hope you liked the video. A thumbs up is appreciated. You can also connect with me via Facebook or Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter for latest updates. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss the videos like this one. Thank you. Thanks for watching.